I'd appreciate your talking about our relationship to Jesus. What attitude should we take toward him? Should we consider him the first in our line of gurus? Is Ananda a yogic organization with Christ as an inspiring factor? Or are we a Christian teaching distinguished by the fact that Christ said to use Kriya Yoga as a means for God communion? In the Festival of Light, you describe Christ's desire to have Kriya Yoga taught to his followers. You state that it was Jesus himself who said, "Bring a teaching for the people of my church, who are strong in good works but lack the noble taper of God communion." How did you come to write that statement? I don't see anything in the autobiography that shows Christ's emphasis being that strong. The answer is that Master said it. It isn't in his books, but he talked about it openly in public and to me. And Christ is. Because of that, he deserves to be called the first of our gurus, not because it's a political statement that here we are in a Christian land, and therefore it's a good thing to say, but because he actually did appear to Babaji and did ask him to send this mission, and the two of them together sent, Master to the West. Master he didn't put it in the autobiography, but he did say it. So I don't know what more to tell you than that, except that it's a mistake to think that, we honor him because he's the founder of a teaching. He is one of our gurus. He, as well as Babaji, sent Master to the West. Okay? I won't dwell long on these things because there are lots of questions. Could you comment on the issue of how a devotee deals with chronic pain, especially the effect it has, excuse my voice, I don't know, especially the effect it has on the mind, and how to become more impersonal and expand beyond identifying with the limited self? Well, I can give you my own experience, which has been this, that for years I had great pain in my hips. When the doctors finally decided to operate on my hips to replace them, they said from the x-rays they could not see how I had been able to walk. And when he opened me up, he said he had never seen such a bad case. He replaced 2 inches of bone. That's how much it was worn down by walking. Now, every step was a pain. Every step was an intense pain. I used to look for the first possibility to sit down. When I'd go into a shop, I'd look for the nearest chair. I'd stop and get a cappuccino whenever I could. And because of that, I gained quite a bit of weight. But how did I do it? I guess all you can say is willpower. But also, I don't feel that I'm just this body. And so maybe that's the answer. How to exercise willpower in order not to feel. I think just to don't identify yourself with the body. Now the body pretty well insists that you do so, but your willpower can rise above that. And although I remember one time I was walking with Rosanna in Lugano, and we only had 2 blocks to walk, and she was talking. Finally she said, "Why aren't you answering me?" I said, "Listen, it takes every ounce of willpower to put one foot in front of the other. I can't even think about what you're talking about." Yeah, it was painful. And I'm very glad that that's over with. Somebody asked, do you think your tests are over? Huh. Doesn't seem to be my lot. But I know when I had the second hip replaced, which he didn't feel he could do right away, he wanted to give me something to walk on. And after that I said to him, well, now I'm in a position to say hip, hip, hooray. And so I don't know if that helps, because but it does help develop willpower. You just have to put out your energy to. Anyway, enough of that one. We all got problems. The first secret of love from your book is courtesy. Would you explain why this is such an important quality? It isn't the placement that makes it important. It's not more important than anything else as a secret of love. But it is a beginning. Because you can't love anybody really, and you can't love God really, if you aren't considerate. When I think of the enormous love Master has poured out to us, it's just staggering. He's concerned for us. When I hear fellow disciples talk about his sternness and his discipline, listen, he came here for only one reason, to help get us out of this mess. That's his only interest. It was his only interest. Yes, sometimes he had to scold, but always I would see there was pain in his eyes at having to scold. He just wanted our welfare and our happiness. I don't think many people understood that, but thank God I did. It was so thrilling that there's no way to describe it, although I try in my talks and books and everything to help get some idea across. But courtesy, without courtesy, how can you be genuine in your consideration? Courtesy is sort of not the most important, but the beginning. It opens the door. When you are courteous to other people, you begin to think of their needs, their well-being, and from there, you begin to feel a concern for them. So I think that it does come first, and it's rightly placed first in the book. The other side of it is that certainly it's not the most important. I'm going through these things fairly quickly because there isn't much time. If the point between the eyebrows represents spirit and the base of the spine represents the pull of matter, does this same relationship exist between the medulla and the spiritual eye? Yes, it does. Actually, the spirit is located at the top of the head, but the way to reach that is through the spiritual eye. I've heard it said by yogis, but I don't know it, I didn't hear Master say it, that if you go straight to the top of the head, to the Sahasrara, there can be some imbalance. It shouldn't come from the medulla or it should come from the open spiritual eye upward. That's esoteric, and I don't think I need to explain it more. But the fact is that the spiritual eye is the same center as the medulla. They are the positive and negative poles. The medulla is the negative, the spiritual eye. The Ajna chakra is the positive. So when you direct the energy through the medulla to the spiritual eye, you help to transcend ego and focus it in God consciousness. That's why Master said that a master directs all his actions from the spiritual eye, and from the point between the eyebrows. Whereas the average human being, centered in his ego, directs all his actions from here. Now, a little bit of practice, and you'll understand what I mean when I say that. When we die, where do we go, and how do we leave? In one of your talks, you said that masters leave through the spiritual eye. Damn it, my voice is not clear. And the rest of us go into deep sleep. That's not so. Worldly people go into a deep sleep. Worldly people, she speaks about the tunnel of light that people experience. To many, Master said that anybody who has even meditated a little bit will enjoy heaven. Heaven isn't only for masters, it's for the likes of us'ns. It's for people who meditate and are somewhat aware spiritually. Worldly people don't go to heaven, but they may experience, then probably do experience this going through the light and into the light before they sort of lose touch. Now, the difficulty in talking about this is that the variety is just about infinite. There are many, many levels of spiritual awareness and lack thereof. And so you can't make absolute rules. But generally speaking, the more inwardly and spiritually aware you are through meditation, the more aware you're going to be on that level. The less so, the less conscious. Okay? I've recently been rereading a place called Ananda, and after a question, I asked Jyotish, wondering in what incarnation Master was liberated. I thought of another question. Jyotish explained that Master was a part of a group of avatars that had been liberated, probably for eons, that come to Earth over and over again during our historical times when needed. My question or thought is, given your role in this age, well, let's keep my role aside for a moment. Master didn't say that, but he did say, I was liberated many lifetimes ago. Those were his exact words. Now, I asked him the question, well, what about William the Conqueror? I didn't say that, but I said, is it possible for a master who is liberated to come into this body and lose Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Because how could he live as William if he was in Nirvikalpa Samadhi? It doesn't make sense. Not only that, we see that Lahiri Mahashaya, who had been King Janaka, who had been great masters in the past, he wasn't conscious of it until Babaji awakened those things. Master wasn't conscious of it for some time. They get awakened to that state, but they come into this body. I asked him, is it possible to lose that consciousness? He said, no, you never lose. And this was a very interesting answer. He said, you never lose your consciousness of being free. And I can understand that. You can see that in William's life too, there was no fear of anything. He knew that nothing would touch him. If he died, okay, he died. But he was not a man bound by passion. Worldly people have imposed their passions onto him. But a careful study of his life, you see that inwardly there's always freedom. Now I'm a way below that, but I certainly understand that statement. As I look back, there's been basically a lot of freedom inside. I really just haven't felt touched. I think many of you have felt that. The more you go on the path, the more that becomes true. And when people project onto me strong desire that this be so and that be so, It's never been the case. And if I'm that way, how much more is it for Master? I can see that it's sort of like this, that when you've seen a movie, you know, with the story of Ananda who betrayed him, in Master's autobiography, there are many subtle things there that you couldn't possibly know if you didn't have the inside story, so to speak. But Master was upset because Sri Yukteswar was upset with him and said something about him critical to Master's father. Master said then, the only reason for his dissatisfaction with me, his displeasure with me, was that I had been trying to convert, against his gentle admonishment, a certain person to the spiritual path. Now that's the play of the masters. That man was Ananda. Sri Yukteswar knew that he'd have a great test and great difficulties because of Ananda. Master knew it too. He told Tulsi Bose, who told Sister Shaila Shuta, that when they were young men together, boys really, he said to Tulsi Bose, someday he'll betray me and marry a white woman. He knew it. It's sort of like I was thinking of Paul Rudeman. We watched a movie of the Second World War, and Paul Rudeman was a member of my dad's company who was sort of pro-Nazi, and my dad had absolutely no use for him. Well, I have to say I had absolutely no use for his daughter. She was one of these pests who go to the movies and tell you just what's going to happen before it happens. But you know, when you watch a movie, you want to enjoy what's happening, and you want to be a little surprised, for God's sake. And she didn't. She was just wanting to show off, you see. She'd seen it, she knew. Well, just think what it would be like with a master. He knows the whole thing. He knows the whole show. He knew everything. I asked him just a few days before his passing, has everybody come to you whom you saw in your vision in Ranchi back in 1920? He said, there are just a few yet left to come. And they came in those last few days. So he knew all these things. But what an uninteresting life it would be. You yourself, if you're seeing a movie for the second time or 10th time, you still try not to think about what's coming so you can enjoy it. And so it is with a master, that he sort of puts a little veil over his mind so he can be a part of it. But he's not touched by it at all. And how long has Master been around as a master? He didn't say. He just said it's been a long time. One time Norman had a vision in which he saw himself with Master on Lemuria, which, according to legend or something, was 80,000 years ago. And I was horrified. I said, sir, have I been your disciple for thousands of years? He said, it's been a long time, that's all I'll say. I said, does it always take so long? Oh yes, desires for name and fame and this and that. Take them away again and again. And then finally they realize this is really all they want. Senor Cuaron, who was the center leader in our center, SRF center in Mexico. Master said to him, I lost sight of you for a few lives, but now I have you again. I'll never lose sight of you again. And every now and then Cuaron would say, you remember your promise? Master said, I remember, I won't lose sight. But he said that he was Arjuna. It's interesting how many parallels there are there. But the story of Arjuna is that he and Krishna, many incarnations before then, were Narayan Narayan. Two of the great masters of ancient India. In fact, there's a story of one time Satan tried to tempt them by manifesting a beautiful maiden. And Nara just created 100 maidens just as beautiful, if not more so. So Satan realized, well, there's nothing in it for me. But he said he's been coming and he was liberated many lifetimes ago. I think it's a safe assumption that he's been around a long time. There are certain masters who have responsibility for this planet, and that seems to be their role. And Master's one of the gang. Master's one of that group. Now these are mysteries which there's no point in going into it. We've got it now. Work with what you have. Because you know that it's taken you quite a while to get here. When I look at the faces of people who come, they obviously are not newcomers. They've been on this path before. In fact, I asked Master, when I first met him, I said, "Sir," it was in the church in Hollywood. Norman told me he'd been a yogi before, and I thought, wow, that's something. I'd never heard of reincarnation, really, except once my brother talked about it, and I argued against it. And here I was suddenly completely committed to a discipleship, to yoga, to living this life completely. So when I saw Master, the next time I saw Master, I was really hot to ask him this one. I said, "Sir, have I been a yogi before?" He said, "Many times. You'd have had to be here." Now that's quite a statement. But mind you, it doesn't mean that you're out of it just because you're a disciple. A guru has to be endlessly patient. He has to know that it's going to take you a long time to work out these various kinks in your heart, desires for this, desires for that. It's just a part of the game. Master told me he had met Judas in this century, means the 20th century. I said, "What was he like?" He said, very withdrawn, very much not attached to anything. He had a little bit of fascination with money. It wasn't attachment, but a certain fascination. And Ramakrishna, who was his, I said that and I didn't mean to. Anyway, he said, let him be, meaning he suffered enough. But what happened was, Master said that Jesus appeared to Ramakrishna and asked him to liberate this disciple. And Ramakrishna, in one of his stories, said that he saw Shalva. I think that's what they called him as a boy. And that he was one of the disciples of Jesus. Well, that was the one. And he had a vision, Ananda, when he went to Rome. And he knew that there was a close connection with Jesus. He, during Ramakrishna's life, had a great love for his wife, Ramakrishna's wife, and wanted to make sure that she was provided for economically. He wrote the book on the sayings of Ramakrishna, the life of Ramakrishna, just to raise the money so she would be secure. He had that instinct for money, but he didn't have the personal desire for it. So your nature is always there, but you can transform it, you can purify it, and that's what he did. Now, the next part of this question regards me personally. Given your role in this age in freeing Master's teachings for the world, wouldn't you too have had to be a part of this group? Well, Yes, I'm sure I've been involved, but not on that level. I'm still a disciple, working hard, and thank God I really don't feel any attachment. But I've had desires to work with. Master said he felt free. I felt mostly free, but not completely. No, I think that it would be a great mistake to put me on that level, because I'm simply not. So let's try to be realistic about these things. That I've been a disciple for a long time, he said it. That I've been dedicated for a long time, he said it. Yes, when he said you have a great work to do, I have to assume that there's some sort of good karma working there. But if you're looking for a role model, look to him. And me as the sort of a peon who's trying to help out, that's all. That's enough. I'm really not very important. Apparently there are bija mantras for each chakra. Master hints at these things in the lessons, but look, we've got enough to work with what he's given us. I really urge you not to get so tied up with these things, and that goes also for you. It's not a good thing to get so involved that you think that you'll really have it together when you have it here. Master's given us what to do. We don't need all that information. You've often told the story of how Master said that even the desire for an ice cream cone must be fulfilled. Well, what if you have a desire and then realize you don't want that desire fulfilled? Sorry, folks. It makes sense, and that's why I asked Master that question. It's there in your subconscious. And until you can extirpate it from your subconscious, it'll be there. But don't worry about it either. Because when you love God, as Master said, when ecstasy comes, everything goes. So, even to want it now and actively isn't all that bad. Your little desires, satisfy them. It's no big deal. It's the bigger ones you have to think about. But all those things will come out. And what happens is that in deep meditation, in one lifetime, a whole incarnation of karma can be just washed away. So don't worry about that. There's a group of us in our 20s that are feeling drawn to magnetize the village for other young people. How can we create an energy to help make this happen? I would say that I very strongly and wholeheartedly applaud that desire. We need young people. We need people who are not just going out the revolving door, but coming in. And gosh, I came when I was 22. And how to do it? Just give your heart to it. That's the best thing. You're no different from any of us. We're just all devotees. I've heard the ACSR, Ananda Church of Self-Realization, described within Ananda as a New Age religion. I thought I read somewhere that you said it was not. Would you clarify? It's not, in the sense that when you think of New Age, you think of all sorts of goofy stuff. If you think of it differently, not the way other people define New Age, which means wearing long beads and long hair and God knows what else, you have to simply accept that we certainly are in a New Age. And I do think this is a religion for the New Age because it works with energy, because it works with the individual. It doesn't work with organizations. We have to be an organization. But our whole emphasis is the individual. Master gave his organization the name Self-Realization Fellowship for a good reason. He wanted it to be individual, not organized, not institutionalized. And I think that's a very important distinction. But we're certainly geared to the new age in that sense. This is the Dwapara Yuga, expression of religion, which is not dogmatic, but deals with the energy. And we talk about that all the time. Most of the well-known teachers on the subject of the chakras today teach their students the traditional bija mantras. I've gone into that. Master one time was asked, why don't you teach mantras? Because there's this whole tradition of passing a mantra to the disciple in the right ear. Master said, this isn't the age for that. It's not that he was against it. He said, this is not what is right for now. That to me was a sufficient answer. And there are a lot of efforts to get there through mantra. It wasn't Master's way. He said, Om is the real sound. That's what we should concentrate on. I've talked about the Karan chakra. You've asked that. Students mention seeing colors in meditation and wonder if seeing a specific color has a special meaning. Yes and no, not necessarily. You know, that's a question Jyotish asked too. We emphasize the sounds of the chakras because they're a great deal easier to access. You have to have a certain amount of spiritual development, usually, to be able to see the colors. But I think that if you see them, this may be meaningful to you, but just to see color, usually it doesn't mean that. It's sort of your aura in a way. Every thought, every state of consciousness does project a certain light. And that light is, to some extent, definitely associated with the chakras. But I guess the most important thing that I want to say is don't think too much about those technical things, because basically we've got a long way to go in this country getting out of the consciousness of matter into devotion. And your techniques and so on, that's where you are right now. I don't see any great yogis to whom these are necessarily the pressing issue. Don't get ahead of yourself too far. Can you tell us more about Yogananda's understanding of himself as a master and an avatar beyond what you've written in the path? Surely he said more than his rather veiled assent to being an avatar. Well, he said, I was liberated many lifetimes ago. That means avatar. It wouldn't be in the fitness of things for him to declare himself that way. He said it. I heard him say it a number of times in those terms. How did he come to awareness that he was, or did he always know? I think I've answered that. Could a master or avatar legitimately deny that he was one if asked? No. If so, could this explain why John the Baptist denied he was Elijah when people asked him? That's a different story. They didn't ask him, are you a reincarnated saint? We don't know how accurate the quote was of his answer. Master's explanation of it was that he was not in that role in this lifetime. And he didn't want to put himself on that role because he'd given his powers to Jesus. These are very esoteric things. I really urge you not to get too involved in this kind of questioning. And I'm speaking as somebody who has been thoroughly interested in all of them. When I first came to Master, mind you, a week before, I had never heard the word guru, the word yoga, karma, nothing. Almost all our basic teachings I'd never heard of. And here, 1 week later, after reading the autobiography, I was so completely swayed, convinced by him, that I just knew this was for me. I made a lightning decision, you might say. I took virtually the next bus from New York to Los Angeles. He accepted me again within half an hour, which was, you might say, unheard of. And you'd like to be able to think, well, then I must have had some great samadhi. No, I didn't. I can't make any such claim. But I knew it was for me. And but my heart was convinced. My mind was totally confused. Because I was the kind of fellow who needs to get it all together. And Boone was somebody who loved to give all these esoteric answers. And my invariable question was, did Master say that? If he didn't, I'd put it aside. If he said yes, then it was something to be believed in. But I never, for a moment, since that time when I met Master on September 12th, 1948, I've never had a doubt about him. I've had lots of doubts. I mean, how could you not? I had to sit down every 15 minutes while working to try to calm his mind, which was just in a furor. And mind you, I had argued with my mother not very long before about when she talked about the miracles of saints. I thought, oh, that's nonsense. And I just wouldn't accept it at all. And here suddenly, our first guru is centuries old. Page 8 of the autobiography. Lahiri Mahashaya materializes in a wheat field. I mean, this was pretty heavy stuff. The only way I could handle it was I knew in my heart I had to put the other on a shelf. And over a period of time, I found that my doubts were vanishing because I saw Master manifesting these things in so many different ways. I understand. But what was the question? That wasn't the question. What was it? Anyway, the point is that it wasn't easy. Yeah, the question was the one I raised. Don't get so involved. I've seen that finally the answer to my questions, there was a period I went through in 1950 of intense doubt. I still knew he was my guru, but still there was doubt. I couldn't help it. I mean, it was this bad that if he had said, it's raining in Los Angeles when we were at the desert, this little sneaky, devilish voice in my subconscious would have said, I bet the sun's shining. What are you going to do? You can't quell those things. You can't pretend they're not there. They're the voice from the past. Master said that in the past you were filled with doubts. But I came to find that the answer to those doubts was not to get on the phone and say, what's the weather like there? Well, he never said that anyway. But that was the level of my own confusion. I found that when I could love, when I could feel his love, everything resolved itself. Love is the answer to doubt, not all this thinking. You'll never get it together. Listen, any doubt that I've ever had addressed to me, I'm way ahead of you. But I also know, I know the answers to most of the questions, and I know that the main answer is the one Master gave when it was that other Kriyananda in Chicago, in fact, who came to Master, and I've told the story in the path, Haven't given his name there.
Shelley.
Huh?
Shelley.
Yeah. No, not Shelley. Disciple of Shelley.
Oh.
Kriyananda. And he had this long list of intellectual questions that he wanted to ask Master. Master said, love God. I thought, shook his head. Read the next question. Master said, love God. This guy shook his head and said, well, asked his next question. Master said, love God. Got up and walked out. And so this man has ever since then quoted this story as proof that even masters have their problems. Well, it was his problem. Master could have answered those questions. They weren't the right questions. If people come to us and ask the wrong questions, they're just spinning their wheels. It's not worth it. But if they want to know how to grow, how to purify their hearts, how to become more spiritualized, that's what it's all about. This other stuff is just a waste of time. You can answer 1,000 such questions, you'll still come up with another 1,000. I've been on the path over a decade, and I've had no strong experiences with seeing the spiritual eye or hearing any of the sounds. Sometimes I get discouraged. What can help me? Well, all I can say is that enough other people have had these experiences to give you a certain basis for faith. When Marco Polo came back from China, everybody said he was a liar. He told all these fantastic stories of the Orient. Ridiculous. In fact, for several centuries, a word for a liar or a lie was to say, oh, that's a Marco Polo. But then, bit by bit, people traveled there and came back and told the same stories. And finally, they began to think, well, then there's good reason for it, so that you don't have to go and do that all yourself to see it for yourself. So yes, it would be very nice if you could have these experiences, but if you don't, many people do. One of the most interesting of them is when you explain the spiritual eye to people who have never heard these teachings and say, oh, is that what I've been seeing? And that has happened many times. So apart from the fact that, of course, you see these things with time, and when your mind is calmer, it will come. But don't get discouraged. You can actually become quite highly advanced and never see the light. These are experiences. They're not the whole cheese. The real essence of spiritual development is purity of heart. The more you know in your heart, you just want God. That's far more important than seeing things and having visions. Boone had some fantastic visions. Norman had incredible visions. Several people who were on the path and left it had great experiences. I think it was their souls trying to hold them onto the path to save them. Master told Boone, if you don't stay with it, it's going to take you 200 lifetimes to come back to where you are right now. That's quite something. I saw Boone on his bed, completely without breath. He was in another state. Norman, at that same time, Master took him out of his body, showed him the astral world. Boone was with them. These are things that were not that unusual, but they were people who didn't stay, too. And I don't say that everybody who had such visions left. No, I don't mean that. But I remember one time little Jan Savage, 9 years old, had a vision of Jesus Christ. And he really wanted to know, was this real? So there was always a line of people going up to greet Master after his services. Jan got in line. And when he reached Master, before he could say anything, he was going to ask Master. Master took him by the forelock here and said, "So, little Jan had a vision of Jesus." He said that was a true vision. Many things do happen. Chuck Jaycott, who left, his father was a plumber and he knew the plumbing trade, and he was out at the lake shrine, and he could not get that pump to work that was bringing water up the hill. So he prayed to Babaji. All of a sudden, Babaji appeared. And they talked for a while, and after he came out of that ecstasy, the pump was working. I've heard lots of stories like that. It's not something I've been blessed with. I've had wonderful feelings, experiences, but my path has not been one of experiences with a capital E. And part of my consolation has been to see how many of those who had them, there was some blessing of Master trying to hold them. But the essence of the path is your pure desire for God alone and your wish to help other people. And Master put me in charge. He didn't put them in charge. So he saw something there. I know that there was a black monk there, Vance Milligan. Master said to him once, "You should mix more with Walter. You don't know what you have in him." Well, I didn't either. But don't go so much by that. Nonetheless, you should work hard, because it will come, and it can come soon. So I certainly don't want to put these experiences down at all. But I do want to say what Master said, the path to God is not a circus. In fact, Master said to me something interesting. He said, God is hiding these things from you because of your doubts in the past. So, okay, I've got to live with it. I don't have the doubts, but I do have that burden. He said he won't come to you until the end of life. Death itself is the final sacrifice you have to make. What is the relationship between spiritual practices and the conservation of nature? Listen, the more you're spiritual, the more you're in tune with God and with nature, and the more you're working for the ecological balance of this planet. If everybody were a yogi, there would be no need to worry about the ecology. I'd say put God first, and all these things will be added. And if you have to have a cause, okay, but don't make an idol of it. Here's somebody who's asking about a question of another technique. Well, there are lots of techniques. I'm not going to go into it. We have a very good system, and that doesn't mean you can do all of them. You'll never get it right. Do you think your greatest trials are over? I doubt it. I wouldn't know what to do. I'm often asked questions by people with spinal defects, such as scoliosis, about keeping the spine straight. I seem to remember you saying that if, for instance, one has double curvature of the spine, okay, the astral spine would still be straight. Well, it may or it may not be, but it'll be a lot easier to straighten the astral spine than the physical. If you have it, don't worry about it. It's a karma. There isn't a karma that can't be expiated. And it can be expiated on the astral plane. It doesn't mean that a hunchback will suddenly lose his hunch. It will be there physically, but he can straighten it out mentally. You know, Constant Desquier, who was this first center leader of SRF in Paris, and I kept hearing, I had heard about this terrible experience he'd had with Kriya. And so I'd never heard of anybody having a terrible experience with Kriya. So I went there in 1955 as the head of the center department, and he grabbed me and took me into a room and sat me down and said, I've had this terrible experience. He said, I was meditating and I saw this light. And I found myself going into this light. And it was just terrible. Well, I said, I should have those problems. But you know, that's why I say don't put too much emphasis on experiences. There was this woman Dr. Lewis talked about, and I mentioned her not too long ago, who came to the center in Boston that he had. And the first time she was there, she saw the 1,000-petaled lotus. She saw the light of the walls, that everything was light. You could see through the walls into the next room. Not a usual experience. Lots of people, when they're new on the path, are given these things to sort of encourage them. But they never saw her again. It came too easily for her. Don't put too much emphasis there. Be grateful when it comes. But keeping a straight spine, if you can't, then try to imagine your astral spine straight. Could you define the monastic order as regards Ananda? This is a too deep and complex a question for a hasty answer. Talk to Jyotish and Devi about it. Whereas pain is the fruit of self-love, joy is the fruit of love for God. For me, self-love was a huge turning point in my life, away from self-hatred and shame. So I wonder if you could clarify these words for me. Well, you want to accept yourself. You want to love the God in you as in everybody. You don't want to sit in a corner hugging yourself. The more people think, what's in it for me, the less they have of happiness. So self-love, this is a different level of teaching when you talk about loving yourself as opposed to hating yourself. Certainly you should accept yourself. Certainly you should accept that God is in you as in everybody. But if your love for yourself makes you hate other people, that's not good. If your love for yourself makes you not be concerned for other people, that is not good. So understand that any words are such a frustrating thing to use, because truth is something you can only understand intuitively. This is a good example, even though it's a very basic and true teaching to say that self-love is the fruit of pain. Nonetheless, not that kind of self-love that it means accepting yourself and loving the God in you and seeing that this arm and this body are a part of God. That's great. Nothing wrong with that. I hope that's clear, because I don't have time to make a lecture out of it. I think I've answered your question here satisfactorily. What are the yogic implications of donating body parts and organs? Well, I'd say this, that your death is the most sacred moment in your life. And quite honestly, to have to think about somebody coming in there while you're lying there, withdrawing your energy, messing with your eyes to get those pupils out so somebody else can see, frankly, I don't see it. It's a very noble thing, but that's a moment I'd like to think about God. And so I don't know more than that. There may be times when they can take other organs. Personally, I'd just as soon, I've used my body for the welfare of other people, but I think that's a moment between me and God. I don't want to think further that way. Again, this question is more than I want to get into. You asked the question about Swaha at the end of Mahamritanjaya. That's when you're doing a fire ceremony. Since I'm not doing that, I leave out the Swaha. You could be seeing some sort of light there. I see lights in my eyes that are purely physical. And in fact, I went to an oculist to have him look at them. He said that I could be having problems down the road, but not yet. But there are physical things for creating these lights in the eyes. That's not for me. Ask Peter. He knows the answers to those things. And these other things, Gandalf, I just wouldn't worry about all that. I think you ask too many of this sort of thing. Truthfulness is, I'd talk about this with you. It's not for me to get into now.
Swami, I think there's one more. Next.
You're not
Thank you. It seems as if Ananda is an expansive stage. Do you see ministers going out to foster centers and grow new colonies? Whatever God wants. Somebody asked me once, what are you trying to do? I said, have fun. We're just trying to serve and serve with joy. And whether we're to go out or not, I think we are going out. But let's not make a system of it. If we have the teachers to send out, fine. I don't want to send people out who aren't ready to go out. It could be harmful to them. People are more important than things, and here we're talking of a thing. So there's no real answer to that. We've spread out a great deal in the last few years. No doubt we're going to be doing more. But I think that much of the... I've also said to our 7 colonies that I see you as one, but I expect hundreds of colonies in the future. I wouldn't want all those colonies to be Ananda in the same sense, because that would mean too much control. I don't like organization. Nor do I think that most of our people would want to go out and do something totally different, but people will, and I think we should encourage it. Let the future take care of itself. It will. I sort of let myself be led by the nose, you might say, but I don't sit here planning, this and then this and this. God does it a lot better, so leave it to Him.